At my graduation party, my pregnant sister publicly accused me of flirting with her husband, but he shocked everyone by revealing her affair and that the baby wasn't his, which sparked a huge fight and destroyed our relationship forever. My nursing school graduation party, held last Saturday at my parents' house, turned into an unforgettable spectacle. It was a grand affair, celebrating a major milestone for our family as I am the first to earn a degree. Our entire extended family, college friends, and neighbors gathered to honor this significant achievement and acknowledge everyone who supported me. My sister, Emily, 24 and 8 months pregnant, arrived with her husband, Dennis, whom she's been married to for 3 years. I anticipated a smooth evening, as she seemed genuinely pleased for me when I shared news of the party and even offered to help my mom with decorations. However, Emily typically seeks to be the center of attention, a pattern evident in her announcing her engagement at our cousin's wedding reception, revealing her pregnancy at our grandmother's 80th birthday, and consistently posting exaggerated social media updates for sympathy. The celebration was progressing wonderfully. Everyone congratulated me on completing nursing school, inquired about my job prospects, and shared personal career stories while enjoying the barbecue my dad had prepared since early morning and the cake my mom ordered from the downtown bakery. As I chatted with college friends on the back patio, Emily abruptly rose from her seat at the main table, where she'd been with Dennis, and headed towards our group. Her determined expression signaled an impending dramatic scene. She stopped directly in front of me, pointed at me, and loudly declared for all guests to hear that I had been flirting with her husband all evening, attempting to seduce him while she was pregnant and vulnerable. The entire party fell silent, conversations halting mid-sentence. Emily continued to shout, calling me a terrible sister who couldn't bear to see her happy, accusing me of jealousy regarding her marriage, and attempting to ruin her family because I was bitter about being single and alone. I tried to reason with her, stating her accusations were absurd and that I had barely spoken to Dennis beyond a greeting upon their arrival. Yet, she repeatedly interrupted me, growing louder, pointing dramatically, and claiming she saw me touching his arm and laughing at his jokes in a clearly inappropriate manner. Dennis stood by, looking stunned and uneasy, as everyone watched the unfolding scene. My parents rushed over from across the yard, their faces etched with worry, having heard Emily's voice above the general hubbub. I told Emily she was creating a spectacle over nothing and needed to sit down and stop embarrassing herself and everyone else. But she persisted, beginning to cry and speaking of feeling betrayed, claiming she couldn't trust anyone in her own family. Then, Dennis, who had been completely silent and staring at the ground throughout Emily's accusations, suddenly looked up and revealed that Emily was the one who had been unfaithful, and that the baby she was carrying was likely not his. The party gasped, and Emily's face turned completely white as Dennis continued, explaining he had discovered text messages on her phone 3 weeks prior from someone named Randall, with whom she had been having an affair for months. He added that the timing of the pregnancy aligned with the affair. Emily immediately shrieked that Dennis was lying, attempting to divert attention from his own behavior. However, Dennis pulled out his phone and began reading some text messages aloud while Emily tried to snatch the device from his hands. The messages were distinctly romantic and sexual, mentioning meetings at hotels when Dennis was working late shifts. One particular message expressed Emily's concern about the pregnancy and whether she should disclose the truth about paternity to Dennis. Emily was sobbing and screaming that the messages were taken out of context and that Dennis was trying to humiliate her in front of our family. Yet, Dennis continued reading more messages that unequivocally showed she had been deceiving him for months about her whereabouts and companions. All the suppressed anger and frustration I had harbored about Emily's attention-seeking behavior over the years erupted. I completely lost my temper because she had ruined what was supposed to be my special day with her false accusations and theatrics. I stepped forward and shoved Emily hard enough for her to stumble backward. When she tried to steady herself against the table, I grabbed her shoulders and began shaking her, shouting that she was a selfish liar who couldn't stand anyone else having a moment of happiness. Emily started hitting me back, and we ended up in a full physical fight right there, in front of all the party guests, with her pulling my hair and me slapping her face while our relatives and friends stood in shock. My dad and 2 of my uncles had to physically separate us while my mom cried, asking what was wrong with both of us. Emily held her pregnant belly, claiming I was trying to harm her baby, while I screamed that she had destroyed my graduation party with her lies and attention-seeking antics. I never intended to hit her belly. I was just angry and avoided that area. Dennis simply stood watching the entire fight without attempting to intervene. After my dad pulled me away from Emily, Dennis announced to everyone that he was leaving and Emily could find her own way home because he was done with her lies and manipulation. He walked out of the party while Emily was still crying and begging him not to leave her. Then she turned to our parents and began demanding they choose between supporting her or me in this situation. The party essentially ended after that, as everyone felt uncomfortable and unsure what to say or do. Most guests departed within the next 30 minutes, offering polite excuses about other obligations. My parents were devastated that my graduation celebration had devolved into such a disaster. They spent the rest of the evening trying to comprehend what had occurred and how things had escalated so rapidly between Emily and me. Emily ended up calling a friend to pick her up since Dennis had taken their car when he left. She spent the entire wait crying and claiming that everyone was ganging up on her and that I had always been jealous of her life. I helped my parents clean up the decorations and leftover food from what should have been a joyful celebration. I regret reacting the way I did. Additional context on the situation: I've been asked many questions about the specifics of what happened and why the situation escalated so quickly, so I want to provide more background on my relationship with Emily and the history of her attention-seeking behavior that led up to this incident at my graduation party. Emily and I have never shared a particularly close bond. She has always been someone who needs to be the center of attention, causing issues at family gatherings for as long as I can recall. When we were younger, she would pretend to be ill on my birthday, so our parents would focus on her care instead of celebrating with me. Or she would start crying and claim other kids at school were bullying her whenever I brought friends home, ensuring everyone comforted her instead of paying attention to my friendships. As we matured, Emily's attention-seeking behavior became more refined and manipulative. She learned to create drama at significant moments in other people's lives to redirect focus back to herself. For instance, she announced her engagement at our cousin Megan's wedding reception 3 years ago. She stood up during the speeches and displayed her ring, stating Dennis had proposed that morning, which completely overshadowed Megan's special day and caused considerable tension within our extended family. Last year, when our grandmother turned 80 and our entire family gathered for a large celebration dinner at a nice restaurant, Emily waited until everyone was seated and the meal had been served before announcing she was pregnant with her first child. She made this announcement by standing up and clinking her glass to get everyone's attention, then spent the rest of the evening discussing her pregnancy symptoms and due date, making our grandmother's birthday secondary to Emily's news. Dennis has always been a reserved individual who dislikes confrontation or drama. He works as a mechanic at a local garage, keeps to himself, and avoids family disputes, which is why everyone at the party was so astonished when he finally spoke up and exposed the truth about Emily's affair. The reason I was so angry about Emily's false accusations at my graduation party wasn't just because they were untrue, but because this was supposed to be my moment to celebrate a significant accomplishment I had worked incredibly hard for over the past 2 years. Nursing school was exceptionally challenging and demanding. I had to balance studying with part-time work to cover my expenses while living at home with my parents to save on rent. I had struggled academically in high school and never believed I could manage college-level coursework, but I was determined to pursue nursing because I wanted a stable career that would allow me to help people and support myself financially. When I finally graduated and passed my licensing exam, it felt like I had achieved something truly significant that proved I was capable of more than anyone had expected from me. My parents were immensely proud of my achievement because no one in our immediate family had ever graduated from college before. They wanted to throw a large celebration to show how much my success meant to them and to thank all the people who had supported me throughout nursing school. They spent weeks planning the party and invited everyone who had been part of my journey. Emily knew how important this party was to me and our parents, and she also knew that her accusations about me flirting with Dennis were completely false because I had been focused on talking to my college friends and catching up with relatives I hadn't seen in months. Update 1. 4 days later yesterday, I had a long conversation with my parents about Emily's behavior at my graduation party and the years of attention-seeking incidents that led up to this situation. I told them they bear some responsibility for what happened because they've always forced me to pretend we're a happy family instead of directly addressing Emily's problematic behavior. My mom and dad have consistently held the philosophy that family conflicts should remain private and that we should present a united front to the outside world, regardless of what's happening behind closed doors. This meant that whenever Emily did something inappropriate or hurtful, they would tell me to simply ignore it and not make a big deal about it, as family harmony was more important than individual feelings. When Emily announced her engagement at cousin Megan's wedding reception 3 years ago, my parents told me I was being petty for being upset about it, and that I should be happy for my sister instead of focusing on the timing of her announcement. They claimed Megan wouldn't remember or care about this detail years from now, and that I was worsening the situation by bringing it up and creating tension between Emily and the rest of our extended family. After Emily announced her pregnancy at our grandmother's 80th birthday dinner last year, I attempted to talk to my parents about how this pattern of behavior was hurtful and disrespectful to others. Still, they dismissed my concerns, saying Emily was just excited about her life milestones and wanted to share her happiness with the family. They told me I was being jealous and unsupportive and that I needed to work on being more generous and understanding toward my sister. I told my parents that their refusal to address Emily's attention-seeking behavior over the years had enabled her to escalate to the point where she felt comfortable making false accusations at my graduation party. I explained that their approach of always prioritizing family peace over individual feelings had taught Emily she could get away with inappropriate behavior as long as she framed it as sharing her happiness or being emotional. My dad initially tried to defend their parenting approach by saying they had always treated Emily and me equally, and that they couldn't control how their adult children chose to behave at family events. Still, I pointed out that equal treatment doesn't mean ignoring problematic behavior, and that their failure to set boundaries had directly contributed to the situation at my graduation party. I explained to them that Emily's false accusations weren't just hurtful to me personally, but that they had also embarrassed our entire family in front of friends, neighbors, and extended relatives who came to celebrate my achievement and instead witnessed a dramatic scene involving affairs, paternity questions, and a physical fight between sisters. I told them that some of these people might never feel comfortable attending future family events because of what they witnessed, and that Emily's behavior had damaged our family's reputation in the community. My mom started crying during this conversation and said she never realized how much Emily's behavior had been affecting me over the years, and that she thought I was just being competitive with my sister rather than genuinely hurt by her actions. She admitted that they had probably been too focused on avoiding conflict and maintaining the appearance of family unity, and that they hadn't considered how their approach might be enabling Emily to continue behaving inappropriately. I told my parents that their apologies were appreciated, but that I needed to see actual changes in how they handled Emily's behavior going forward, and that I wouldn't be attending any family events where Emily was present unless she publicly apologized to everyone who witnessed her false accusations and the resulting drama at my graduation party. My dad asked me what I meant by a public apology, and I explained that Emily needed to contact all the guests who were at the graduation party and acknowledge that her accusations against me were false, that she had created unnecessary drama at what was supposed to be a celebration of my achievement, and that she was sorry for putting everyone in an uncomfortable position with her personal issues. My parents discussed this privately for about an hour while I waited in the living room. When they returned, they told me they had decided to ban Emily from all future family events until she completed the public apology I had requested. They said they would call Emily that evening and explain their decision, and that they would also reach out to the extended family members who were at the party to let them know they didn't approve of Emily's behavior and that steps were being taken to address the situation. My mom also said she wanted to personally apologize to some of my college friends who had attended the party because she was embarrassed that their first impression of our family had been so negative, and she asked me if I could provide her with their contact information so she could send them a message explaining that Emily's behavior didn't represent our family's values. My parents called Emily that evening while I was at work. According to my mom, the conversation didn't go well because Emily immediately started crying and saying that everyone was turning against her during the most vulnerable time in her life. Emily argued that she was 8 months pregnant and dealing with marriage problems, and that the family should be supporting her rather than punishing her for having an emotional reaction at the party. Emily also claimed that Dennis had been acting suspicious and distant for weeks before the party, and that she genuinely believed I was flirting with him because she was feeling insecure and paranoid about her relationship. She said that her accusations weren't meant to be malicious, but were just the result of pregnancy hormones and stress about her marriage, and that she shouldn't be held responsible for Dennis's decision to reveal private information about their relationship in front of everyone. My parents told Emily that they understood she was going through a difficult time, but that her behavior at the graduation party was unacceptable regardless of her emotional state, and that she needed to take responsibility for the false accusations and the scene she had created. They explained that the family ban would remain in place until she completed the public apology, and that they hoped she would use this time to reflect on her actions and work on repairing the relationship she had damaged. Emily hung up on them before the conversation was finished, and she hasn't responded to any of their calls or text messages since then, which is pretty typical behavior for her when she doesn't get the reaction she wants from family members. Update 2. A few days later, Dennis followed through on his statement at my graduation party and demanded Emily undergo a non-invasive prenatal paternity test to determine if the baby she's carrying is actually his. The results, received yesterday, confirmed he is not the child's biological father. Emily called our parents this morning in tears, stating Dennis had forced her out of their house and told her he was filing for divorce because he could no longer trust her and refused to raise another man's child. According to Emily, Dennis had been cold and distant towards her ever since the graduation party incident. He had been staying in their spare bedroom rather than sleeping in their bed together while they awaited the paternity test results. When the results confirmed the baby wasn't his, Dennis reportedly told Emily he felt completely betrayed and manipulated and couldn't continue their marriage knowing she had been lying to him about the affair and the pregnancy for months. Emily is now 38 weeks pregnant and could give birth at any time. She has nowhere to go because she lacks sufficient savings for her own apartment, and most of her friends have distanced themselves from her since news of the affair and false accusations spread through our social circle. She called our parents, crying and begging them to let her move back into their house temporarily until she can arrange a more permanent living situation after the baby's birth. My parents were conflicted about what to do because they had just banned Emily from family events until she apologized for her behavior at the graduation party. But they also didn't want to leave their pregnant daughter homeless during the final weeks of her pregnancy. They asked me how I would feel about Emily living in their house again and whether I thought it would interfere with our relationship and my willingness to visit them. I told my parents that despite our current feud and my anger about the graduation party incident, I didn't think an innocent baby should suffer because of Emily's poor decisions and behavior. I advised them to let her move back home temporarily to ensure she has a safe place to give birth and recover. I explained that my issue was with Emily's attention-seeking behavior and false accusations, not with her unborn child, and that I could separate my feelings about her from my concern for the baby's welfare. I did tell my parents that I expected them to maintain some boundaries with Emily even if they let her move back home, and that she still needed to complete the public apology for her behavior at the graduation party before I would be willing to have any direct contact with her. I also said that if Emily tried to use her pregnancy and homelessness to manipulate them into dropping the consequences for her actions, then I would reconsider my advice about letting her stay in their house. My parents agreed to let Emily move back home with the understanding that this was a temporary arrangement focused on ensuring the baby's safety and health, and that it didn't mean they were excusing or forgetting about her behavior at the graduation party. They called Emily back and told her that she could stay in her old bedroom until 6 weeks after the baby was born, which would give her time to recover from childbirth and start looking for a more permanent living situation. Emily moved back into our parents' house yesterday with just 4 suitcases of clothes and some basic personal items because Dennis had told her to leave immediately and hadn't given her time to pack properly. According to my mom, Emily has been crying almost constantly since she arrived and keeps saying that her life has fallen apart and that everyone has turned against her when she needs support the most. Dennis apparently told Emily that he would continue paying for her prenatal medical expenses and the cost of delivery since they're still legally married, but that he wouldn't provide any financial support for the baby after it's born because he's not the biological father. He also said that he wanted Emily to remove all of her belongings from their house within the next 2 weeks, and that he would be changing the locks and filing the divorce papers as soon as possible. Emily has been trying to contact the biological father of her baby, who is apparently the Randall person mentioned in the text messages that Dennis read at my graduation party. Still, according to my mom, Randall has been ignoring her calls and messages since he found out about the pregnancy. Emily told our parents that Randall is married with 2 children of his own, and that he had made it clear during their affair that he wasn't planning to leave his wife or take responsibility for any consequences of their relationship. My parents are feeling overwhelmed by having Emily back in the house because she requires a lot of emotional support and attention while she deals with the divorce, the approaching birth, and her uncertain future as a single mother. My mom said that Emily has been monopolizing their time with constant conversations about her problems and fears, and that she's been asking them to make decisions for her about things like finding a lawyer, choosing a pediatrician, and applying for government assistance programs. I've been staying away from my parents' house while Emily is living there because I'm not ready to interact with her yet, and I don't want to create additional stress for my parents, who are already dealing with a difficult situation. I've been calling my mom every few days to check on how things are going and to offer practical advice about resources that might help Emily transition to independent living after the baby is born. Final update. 1 year later, a full year has passed since the graduation party incident that shattered my relationship with Emily and exposed her affair and pregnancy lies. I want to provide a final update on how everything has unfolded for our family and the current situation now that things have settled. Emily gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Grace 3 weeks after she moved back in with our parents. The delivery proceeded smoothly despite all the stress and drama surrounding the circumstances of the pregnancy. Dennis came to the hospital when Emily went into labor because they were still legally married, and he wanted to ensure she had support during the birth. Still, he made it clear that this was the extent of his involvement and that he wouldn't be taking any parental role with the baby. The divorce between Emily and Dennis was finalized about 8 months ago after a lengthy process that involved dividing their shared assets and determining spousal support payments. Dennis ended up keeping the house, while Emily received a small settlement that she used to pay legal fees and start a college fund for Grace. Dennis has been reasonable throughout the entire situation and didn't try to make the divorce more difficult than necessary, even though he had every right to be bitter about Emily's lies and betrayal. Emily never completed the public apology that my parents had required before she could attend family events again. She has essentially been living as a permanent resident in our parents' house rather than finding her own place and establishing independence as a single mother. My parents applied for and received legal custody of Grace when it became clear that Emily was struggling with depression and wasn't fully capable of caring for a newborn on her own. They've essentially become Grace's primary caregivers, while Emily works part-time at a retail job. The biological father, Randall, has refused to acknowledge paternity or provide any financial support for Grace. Emily has been working with a family court attorney for the past 6 months to try to force him to take a paternity test and pay child support. Randall hired his own lawyer and has been fighting the paternity claim because he doesn't want his wife to find out about the affair, and he's worried about how child support payments would affect his existing family's finances. Even if Emily wins the case and receives child support payments, the amount probably won't be enough for her to afford her own apartment and childcare while working full-time. My relationship with Emily has remained tense and distant throughout this entire year because she never apologized for her false accusations at my graduation party or acknowledged that her behavior was inappropriate and hurtful. We've only spoken directly a few times when I've been visiting my parents, and she's been in the same room. These interactions have been polite but cold, with no real effort to address the underlying issues between us. Emily seems to have convinced herself that everyone overreacted to what happened at the graduation party and that she was the real victim in the situation because she lost her marriage and ended up as a single mother with limited resources. My parents have been struggling with the financial and emotional burden of supporting Emily and Grace. They've aged significantly over the past year from the stress of essentially starting over as parents in their late 50s. They love Grace and are committed to providing her with a stable home environment, but they've admitted to me privately that they're worried about their ability to handle the demands of raising a child while also managing their own health issues and retirement planning. I've tried to help my parents by babysitting Grace occasionally and contributing money for baby supplies and expenses, but I've maintained my boundary about not having a close relationship with Emily. Grace is an innocent child who deserves love and support from her extended family, but I refuse to pretend that Emily's actions were acceptable just because time has passed.